All right, massive changes in college football that have finally been announced and approved by a judge. The House Settlement Bill has been approved in college football. What does it mean? What does it change? What does it specifically mean? And some things that are in there that you might not know that directly affect South Carolina. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked on Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked on Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone's having a fantastic Monday, if that's even possible, as I always say. We got a good show for you today. And before we get into it, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked on Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now is a better time than ever to sign up for FanDuel, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right. Let's get into the show. This happened on Friday, and I kind of wanted to do a show then. I made the layout for it and everything. I was like ready to go. I was going to do it. The news came at like 8 o'clock Friday night. And it's just, the whole thing was just weird. But it's also a huge recruiting weekend for South Carolina. So I want to focus on that, do stuff with the recruiting instead of just doing the House Settlement. But as you guys have heard me talk about, have you heard a lot of people talk about the House Settlement Bill, the $20.5 million, it's going to be approved as a basically salary cap. Not a salary cap necessarily, but like an appropriation of funds for every single division, or every single school in the FBS is going to get $20.5 million to put towards their programs. Okay. Now, there's a lot of stuff when this was approved that I didn't even realize. Okay. What we're going to do is go through the entire thing, talk about what it means, what has actually been approved, how it happened, and all that. Because it's actually very interesting. And there's a lot of stuff, even though we knew the $20.5 million thing, ton of stuff that came along with it that we didn't know was going to happen. And that's the main thing I want to get into today. Now, the topics we're going to get into today, like I said, we're going to talk about the $20.5 million, where that money's coming from, where it's going, how it's going to be divvied up. Also, there's news out of the video game, even how that is actually going to be changed, and also how you can directly impact it if you are playing NCAA football 26 on EA Sports. Then there's also, we're going to talk about the potential of there being an actual college sports commissioner. And then the last thing, which is one of the most interesting parts, the NIL clearinghouse, which is kind of being reconstructed and will now sit here and be a part of a teamwork with Deloitte to make sure you approve or don't approve the NIL deals that are coming from different schools. Now, let's start with the $20.5 million. The biggest part of this entire House settlement is that $20.5 million is going to be distributed to each school. Now, we all knew that part was going to happen. What I did not know was that where this money's coming from, right, is this is an entire settlement. Maybe I'm just dumb. It had been so long, I just didn't think about it. But the $20.5 million for each school is coming from a settlement with the NCAA, where the NCAA was basically found wrong, and was going to owe $2.77 billion, $2.77 billion with a B dollars on having to basically pay back the student athletes and programs in the NCAA. The NIL system that they're going to have, it's the whole purpose of this is to even the playing field, but also the money is coming directly from the NCAA. Now, I didn't know that part. Okay, like it makes sense, right? I just hadn't got into the whys of what's happening. So the $2.77 billion, they're having to pay back over 10 years, and that's going to increase year over year. How they're going to come up with this money, 60% of it is going to be from a reduction in the current distribution to schools that they're currently having. So 60% of that $2.77 billion is going to be basically budgeted from a reduction in what they're currently giving to schools. The other 40% is something they're going to have in reducing operating expenses. That's the part I'm honestly most excited about. That's the part that's like, Good. This has been a fat pig that needs to have been slaughtered a long time ago. Okay. That sounds graphic and awful, but that's what the NCAA has been. So $20.5 million is going to go there. That doesn't mean you can't have a collective. It doesn't mean you can't, have like an operating budget that is on top of that and raise money from donors and all that kind of stuff. It just means that you have $20.5 million basically to play with. Now, the other part of that I think is very interesting. We've talked about this on the show before. The $20.5 million is also going to be divvied up between all your sports. So the NCAA has already come out on their own website and said, here's how we expect this to be. Now, the money that's going to be allocated and dispersed at each university is going to be done so differently. It's up to them how much they want to disperse it. The assumption and what was most likely going to happen is across the country at most major universities, 75% of that $20.5 million is going to football, right? Then you're going to talk about getting up to the other 15. The next 15% is probably going to be divvied up between major sports like men's basketball primarily, then women's basketball, baseball, or whatever's in like a bigger sport at your school. Then the rest are, they kind of get the extras. You're already going to see, you've seen some different programs fighting for a right to protect their sports that they think are going to fall by the wayside. The Olympic type sports that like wrestling or swimming or anything like that like NIL hasn't really touched at this point. Those type of things, they're already looking into ways to protect those sports because they might fall by the wayside even with this new money. Now, going back to how they're going to allocate these funds, it is going to change from school to school. I don't know what it's going to be from South Carolina, but I do know that looking at the numbers, and these are all a assumptive and estimated number that the NCAA has come up with on their own website and what they expect from each school. South Carolina was projected last year for their NIL money for football to be around 12th in the SEC in terms of total spending. Their budget for NIL was around $9.5 million is what the assumption was. I don't know how accurate that number is. I personally, if you're like $9 million seems a little bit high from what it was last year. This year changes though, because this year you obviously have more money that's been given. There's also, obviously, they've raised more money with how much excitement's in the program. So that's the biggest part of the first part, right? This was all settled on Friday, and there's a breakdown of funds, but it's all coming, like I said, from $2.77 billion in back damages. Now, how that's going to be broken up is $277 million dispersed per year. I told you how the funds are coming from, but that's the biggest part of this actual settlement. It's been referred to almost exclusively as the $20.5 million House Settlement. Now also this might not seem like it's a big deal. Why it's a big deal though is this. It is the first time that they're admitting and legalizing, in quotes, the direct payment to players. So that's the biggest difference. What they've had this, very thinly veiled guise over the past several years of, we're like, you're finally making money for your NIL and your name, image, and likeness. And here's what you're allowed to be paid. But what has been collective deals, which is, hey, sign some autographs, show to some signings, blah, blah, blah. We're just giving you money. What this is doing is allowing that. And then anything else outside of this money is made through earning instead of being directly paid. Does that make sense? Like this money is basically saying like it's almost like an allowance versus like a job. Like this is what you're given, and then you can go out and make any extra you want. Okay, so that's how it's being broken up. The other part of this whole thing, there are direct ways that players are going to be paid now, but they're going to be under a microscope, and that is something like that is different than we've seen at all before. When we come back, I'm going to explain to you one of the biggest changes that's been very, very surprising is a third-party partner, Deloitte, is going to be involved in whether or not the NCAA clearinghouse will be able to approve or not approve specific deals for athletes. And the number of deals that they have already said would not have been approved is shocking. It is shocking. We will talk about that in a second when we come back. Before we go to break, Do want to tell you about our friends at FanDuel real quick one more time. Listen, it is the height of summer and the sports that come along with it. The NBA Finals are in full effect. You got the Stanley Cup playoffs. You got the college baseball, Super Regionals, and College World Series coming up. But right now, FanDuel is making it easier than ever to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Listen, my personal favorite thing to do, I've been betting a lot on some underdogs in Super Regionals and the Men's College World Series coming up. Also, made several bets in some player props for the NBA Finals, which were Sunday night, and we'll continue on this week. But all of it is made easy, and it's right at your fingertips with FanDuel and FanDuel.com. And right now is as good a time as ever to sign up, because it's the perfect time if you head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, and that wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, let's get back on the show. And this part, honestly, we could have opened with the show with this because it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy and shocking to me that this has been put in place. And there's also weird speculation that how accurate it is, how involved they're going to be, or whatever. But the NCAA clearinghouse, for the longest time, has been the ones, they've been the ones in charge of clearing players, making them eligible, not ineligible, or ineligible, either way. That's been their sole job. With this change and this new frontier of college football and college sports, where people have basically said, like, hey, the NCAA is dog crap and hasn't done anything to help this sport for a long time. So the clearinghouse, that was the NCAA clearinghouse, you're going to have a change in that. And the NIL clearinghouse is now going to be a certain thing, but it's going to be done, and it's an enforcement organization that used to be one of the primary jobs of the NCAA, right? That's all gone because they've already proven they don't do the right things with the eligibility stuff. They don't do the right things with their decision-making, and they have been so uninvolved up until this point. Why would we trust them to do the right thing now when they're the reason we're having to start this new frontier in the first place? So what the power conferences have decided to do is start a new enforcement organization that will monitor payments from schools, boosters, everything like that to players. That is going to be the new NIL clearinghouse. They are also going to partner with a third party, which is Deloitte, and hire a NCAA college sports commissioner, they're going to create the College Sports Commission and have a commissioner. You kind of heard rumblings of this, of who it would be. And it wouldn't be this specific job or role. It's like you've heard, like, is Saban going to be the commissioner of college sports? Or is, Donald Trump talked about they were going to put a commission together, blah, blah, blah. That fell by the wayside. But the power conferences have decided to create the College Sports Commission, and they have hired MLB executive Brian Seeley as its CEO. So this had been in the works for weeks. Jeff Passan from ESPN was talking about this. And then when they finally made the announcement that the settlement was cleared, then it became, hey, this guy's going to head this up and oversee it, and we're going to go from there. And that's going to be our new rule enforcement. That is basically his job is going to be, quote, build out the organization's investigative and enforcement teams and oversee all of its ongoing operations and stakeholder relationships. One of the worst parts of the NCAA not only was how frustrating some of their rulings were, but the length of time it took to make a decision. Look at like Russell Faison. Like look at where like the running back situation is right now and the portal situation is right now from all these players that are waiting for eligibility rulings. Like, and also think about how many have gotten rulings, the lengths they had to go to, something like suing the NCAA just to have a warranted extra year of eligibility is insane. So now with this, you have a new commissioner, an executive, basically, or former MLB executive will be the new CEO of this commission, Brian Seeley. What he is going to do, it says Seeley and his team will be able to be responsible for enforcement of the new rules around rev sharing and student-athlete third-party name, image, and likeness deals and roster limits. This is the thing that is most interesting to me, okay? The situation with Deloitte, producer Ali has just walked in. Let's give her a big hand. You want to weigh in on this, on the settlement? She said no. Okay. The situation with Deloitte is super interesting because there's been differing opinions or facts or rumors or whatever on their level of involvement. But according to On3, one of the things they are going to look at more than anything is if you have an actual NIL deal it's worth over $600, which, let's face it, is probably all of them for most big players. If it's over $600, and that doesn't mean that you are going to, like, that's not from the rev share. That's like when you go out and say, hey, the collective got this deal with me. I'm going to be signing autographs. I'm doing this. What am I getting paid? Oh, $2.3 million. Like, that's my NIL agreement. From now on, anything over $600 in those agreements has to be approved by Deloitte and this new clearinghouse. And what they said, this is like a spokesman from this, was looking at last year's deals, that over 70% of those deals would not have been approved. Over 70% would not have been approved because of how corrupt the whole thing was in such a short time. That part to me is fascinating, okay? That part to me is fascinating. Now, having a commissioner oversee this, it feels weird because you haven't really had any guidance over the sports at this level in a really long time. I think it's a good thing. I will admit to you right now, using any sort of leadership from Major League Baseball is not my favorite thing. The way that they have run that entire organization, the right league, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, doesn't mean it's factual, just my opinion, has been terrible. Like, I mean, think about how many frustrations you've seen with not being able to watch games. I know I live in Atlanta. They moved the All-Star game out of here in 2021 for political reasons. There's like all these different things. And this is not a political statement at all. But I do know that those decisions made like an economic impact of millions of dollars on the city because of something that happened. And it was a decision made by somebody that doesn't live in Atlanta, isn't from here, or any of those things. So the leadership in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, has not been great. It seems very much, in my opinion, that I've said that way too much already. It seems very much, let's look out for the Yankees. Let's look out for the Dodgers. Let's look out for the Dodgers again. And then we'll figure out what we can do with everyone else. That's how this league, I feel like, the MLB, has been run. Now, that doesn't mean how Seeley is going to run the league. He hasn't been running MLB. So maybe he will provide some good leadership. And obviously he has been a specific target of the power conferences for quite some time. Those guys get paid to do this. They know a lot more than me. They know the ins and outs of this a lot more than me. So I would expect them to hopefully, especially with the first decision being made and the first leader of this being the right one and somebody that was well vetted and understood like what they had to do for this whole process and moving forward. So those are the biggest changes that are coming from it. When we come back, the very last part, this is not me saying anything like embellished. This is not me saying like a ad read or anything like that. But there's a direct tie to what you as a fan can do to help out raising money through this settlement to your own school. And when we come back, we will talk about that as well. Locked In Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, let's close out the show with this. So the last thing that's going to change from this is the EA Sports game. Now, you saw this last year when the EA Sports college football game came. Well, they had, I think it was like $500 they're paying the players, $500. This year, that increased by 300%. Players are going to get $1,500 to be in that game. Now, what they're going to do, and this is really cool, what they're going to do is base it off of how much money each team is making. Like, I think there could still be a flat fee or whatever for some. I don't know. Because, like, I imagine Kent State would get the raw end of the deal on this one. But they're going to do basically a certain amount of money. And the more that fans and players of the game play with certain teams and players and programs, the more money that is going to generate for those programs from this game specifically. Okay, so let me explain a little bit more in depth. Here's the deal of how this will play out. Here's how this will play out. The usage from game players, like they're playing the video game, right? The usage of them for specific teams and players and programs will be then directly impacting how much money each school can make, which means at the very least, a little bit of power has been put back into the hands of the fans. You can play with whoever you want. You could, I mean, listen, we saw what was the GameStop situation a couple years ago on Reddit? The GameStop situation a couple years ago on Reddit, like those type of things could easily happen in the world of college sports. You've seen how much people hate the SEC. I read a thing on USA Today the other day. It's like five ways that you can specifically, right? 5 ways, I think the title was 5 petty ways fans can weaponize EA Sports usage payouts in College Football 26. The second thing of the 5 points was screw over the SEC and don't play with any SEC teams, which is hysterical for a number of reasons. But here's the situation of how it's going to actually play out, the way it's written. In a sample scenario from Collect, the total royalties in a university pool would be, let's say, $5 million. If you had 700 million games played, if users played 7 million games as South Carolina, then the school's allocation would be 1%. Therefore, South Carolina would then receive 1% of the original $5 million, which would be $50,000 that would go directly to their players on the roster. It is a way that you can directly impact making more money for the players, which is really cool. And I tell you what, I want South Carolina to benefit from this more than anyone. But one thing that would be really cool, if you see something like I mentioned earlier, Kent State or Kennesaw State, it was like up the road from me right now. Some of these smaller schools, Coastal Carolina, College of Charleston, I don't think they're in it. But like those types of schools, you will see a wave and a groundswell of people trying to go play as those teams specifically to making a little bit of extra money off this. That part to me, I think is pretty cool. So that is mostly everything you need to know about the House Settlement Bill. What are the changes? The only other change that's coming, it's not exactly, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out yet, because there's a lot of stuff that still has to be figured out with who's going to be grandfathered in, who's not, where they're allowed to go, all these things. But the roster limitations you're going to have, they're going to set roster limitations to every single sport. So basketball will get 15 total players. Football will get 105. That may not sound like a big deal, but what that means is in the past, you've had 85 scholarship players, and then you can have however many walk-ons, preferred walk-ons, whatever else you want to have. Now you have 105 on the roster, and that's it. So some of these players, these walk-ons, these kids that have been scout team players forever, they're going to lose their spots on some of these teams. What they're trying to do to make sure that doesn't happen for the current players there is set something up with the NCAA or this new venture and say, let's have a system where we are grandfathered into the current roster and they can play out their eligibility before we move forward with the 105. So the 105 can go into effect, but if you have kids on the team that are over that amount, let them finish out their career and then continue to build off the 105. So set that roster that way. That is all for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope we feel a little bit more clear on some of the changes, and we'll probably have to do this once again, at least one more time in the summer, because they will, I'm sure, unveil and roll out even more changes as it comes on. But massive, massive changes to the landscape of college football with the settlements, and something we were hoping was going to happen before July 1st. So that is all for today's episode. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We talk more Gamecock recruiting and another big commitment today from South Carolina and Shane Beamer. Until then, go Cox.